And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our second fireside chat of the morning. If you could please join me in welcoming CUNY Chancellor Félix Matos Rodríguez and CUF Executive Director Jonathan Bowles.
Thank you. By the way, can I get a big, big round of applause for my amazing staff, Stephanie, Eli, Ale, and everybody else at the Center for an Urban Future. They are so amazing. So thank you to all the CUF staff. So I don't know that I have to introduce my our next guest, CUNY Chancellor Félix Matos Rodríguez, but I do want to say that if you follow.
Thank you for that applause. I'll take it.
If you follow the work of the Center for an Urban Future, you probably know that we write about CUNY a whole lot. I think you probably heard CUNY come up in 4 of our 5 idea pitches today. We do so because CUNY is the city's most important economic mobility institution. Especially in today's challenging economy, it is the launch pad to the middle class. Our next speaker is not only the impressive leader of this great institution, he is a leader who is moving CUNY forward in so many important ways that are helping even more New Yorkers springboard to the middle class. This includes ambitious new initiatives to expand internships, boost career success for students, and increase support for adult learners. I could go on, but please give me give us more than just one person. Thank you. So Phalo, we're going to have this housing conversation today. We said, let's get the biggest housing expert in New York City, right? No, it's kind of strange to have a conversation with you about housing.
Well, it is, but first, thank you for the invitation and thank you for putting together this wonderful forum. But it is, one of the main reasons why, I mean, there's 2 things, right? I don't think I need to tell anybody here that it doesn't require much to think that if you're housing insecure, if you're moving in between places, if you're in a shelter, if you're dealing with the fear of eviction, if you're navigating all that stuff, you can really concentrate on studying, on thinking about, what career you might want to take, perform well if you're part of a paid internship. I mean, clearly, right? And it is one of the main reasons why students either stop or totally leave higher ed. It's not academic chops, is things like housing and food insecurity. And it's important, and this is why I want to take advantage of the invitation, because I think from a policy take, people hear food insecurity and they say, I get that. And housing, because we have this preconceived notion of what college students are, which is wrong, right? We don't think a housing would be, right? Because the students are in dorms, right? Well, most college students are not in dorms nationally, right? That's just a picture that we have of a certain set of schools, right? I mean, about 80% of all the students nationally are not dorming, right? And in the case of CUNY, right, is about 3,000 students out of 250,000, right? So whatever the city and the state and we all get to do in tackling the affordability housing crisis, which is the topic here, is going to have a dramatic impact in the success of our students. So thank you.
Well, thank you for laying that out so well. And I guess I want to kind of bring it back to CUF's core work around economic mobility. So if this institution, if CUNY, if your campuses are such that elevator for economic mobility, but you're saying that it isn't just tuition costs, it isn't academic reasons, but it's these other factors, including housing, that are getting in the way of that economic mobility. But tell us a little bit more, like, how prevalent is this? I mean, like, how many students, are we talking about a few dozen students that are facing housing instability?
So again, I mean, you've probably been working with the different presentations, and if you take a rubric like housing insecurity, and that's defined in different ways, right? And we got experts here, so I don't want to go too much in the weeds. But we have some estimates in some of the work that we've done that between 40 and maybe 30% of the students document having housing insecurity of some kind during the academic year, right? And that is a significant number of students. When you go into homelessness, the more traditionally defined, that is a smaller number, but it's still 3, 5, 6%. And when you think about CUNY, that is a large number of students. If you put a different take, right, and we've been trying to think from a policy perspective on this arena, a report, and it might have been a report that you guys did, that documented that about 154,000 students in the New York City public schools face housing insecurity, right? That's where 80% of my students come, right? So a large bucket of those students, if we get to them and support them, are going to come to CUNY. So we're actually trying to think about how do we, if the Department of Education can already identify those students, right? And these are likely of becoming CUNY students, can we begin to work with them earlier and identify that to be able to eliminate that barrier? But it is a significant number. And for us, this is one arena where we really depend on the partnering with nonprofits in working on the policy arena, because we don't have dorms, right? So some of the things that you might read about good practices in some other places, in schools that do have dorms, is not really something that is part of our arsenal of options. So we really depend on partnering and good policy to address this.
Yeah, and you mentioned how prevalent housing instability is among your students, and I just want to kind of try to connect, and maybe you can help me, that we write about CUNY not just because obviously it's this great economic mobility generator for the city, but what we try to do is say, hey, students that enroll but don't complete, they're not getting the full economic benefits of this amazing. And there's so much research about how people that graduate from CUNY have these economic mobility benefits. But if you kind of drop out, and I guess I wanted to just ask you to kind of connect the dots and in just a couple of seconds about, like, this isn't just housing instability, isn't just this kind of problem for so many students, 30, 40%, but that it is a factor in persistence.
Oh, absolutely. As I said, I think people have the idea that the students who do not complete tend to do it because the classes were too hard, they were not academically prepared, right? And there's a sliver of that. The majority is all these other factors that are the ones that sort of keep them from, and it might be that you're dealing with, we stick to the housing situation, that you're dealing with, let's say, an eviction procedure, you're dealing with housing court, and you decide that you're going to take a semester off to navigate that, right? You do that, you got out, and then it's really, really difficult to bring you back, right? I mean, there's some of the programs and some of the things that some of the policies that's come out of our recommendations from the center, like Reconnect, that has allowed us to sort of bring back a large number of students, and the governor is putting some additional resources into that. But then again, if you were better initially, you wouldn't need to be doing that reaching out in which you lose people. But it derails people, and any derailment there just makes it harder for you to come back, right? And candidly, even if you do stay, right? It affects your GPA, which has an impact on then, applying for jobs or thinking about professional schools. And so it has a multiplying effect. So, actually, I'm dying to sort of get the notes from the conference in terms of things that we can be helpful in advocacy for more affordability on the housing front.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, when it comes to, let's say, food insecurity, you could put a food pantry, which I know you do. When it comes to childcare, you could have childcare assistance at some of your campuses. But when it comes to housing instability, what's CUNY's role in trying to help those students with these issues?
Well, so, I mean, I think joining the forces of advocacy in the city that are talking about large responses to the crisis, right? Because I mean, if that gets substantially improved, it's going to have an impact on my students, right? So that's bucket one. There are things in which we're exploring. We just have, we started a model with our 3 Bronx CUNY schools, CUNY Cares, with Bronx Community, Ostos, and Lehman, addressing basic needs, mostly food and housing insecurity, helping students make sure that to qualify for SNAP, you get it, you don't lose it. And we had a small group do some recommendations on the housing front. One that came and we're exploring to do is our law school has a clinic that supports actually some CUNY students, but it's open to individuals who are dealing with issues in housing court, right? If we had more resources, that clinic could get expanded, and you could see about, maybe setting a mini version of the clinic just with some of the CUNY campuses to assist the students who are dealing with some of these issues. We build additional capacity by having more opportunities for lawyers in training who are interested in this field, right, to do that, and we benefit the students, so we're talking to the law school to explore that possibility. I also understand that there's some, and again, I'm not a housing expert, so there's, the ones in the audience, please be kind, that there is some regulations that mention that students cannot participate in programs, and it's not always technically correct, right? So a lot of students self-select because of that information, that we could be helpful in clarifying that. I always thought that as you establish priority for, housing assistance, I know it's a delicate policy issue, but prioritizing students, could be another thing that could be done. So we're trying to kick all those things, and again, and you have written about this too, open to exploring with nonprofits. We've had some phenomenal work with the Coalition for Neighborhood Shelter in a program. Did I get that name right? And funding from Robin Hood, Petrie, and Trinity to do some work on these areas. So we're looking forward to even more of those partnerships, even maybe leverage some of the space that we have to be able to do some things. So those are some of the things that we're exploring.
That's great. I guess a 2-part follow-up one. With CUNY Cares, what's your, are there learnings, are there next steps to kind of take it to another level? You talked about a pilot in the Bronx. Are you looking to expand it?
It is a pilot, and we're just getting some of the results to be able to see. And the preliminary data is that it has, supporting a network, and I think it was Eli who was mentioning one of the examples before, the navigators in an example that he was using. Student navigators that work with the students has proven that it helps with their retention and graduation. They had a small group looking at housing, which they just briefed me on some of the recommendations last week, right? So we're digesting some of those things. But in some cases, is also amplifying things that we already have had in the schools. We've normally had, when I was at Ostos, that I was president, we had folks in the student affairs team that were working with students that were dealing with housing court, that were dealing with emergency, mini grants at times make a huge difference to be able to pay rent for a month while something gets stabilized and do that. So the governor put, I think, some money into that in the budget currently. So we want to continue to expand those things, but ultimately, the city and the state addressing the issue writ large is going to be the biggest benefit for us, and we want to be helpful in any way to that.
That's great. CUF has written a lot about the non-tuition financial barriers facing CUNY students, because they are huge, and it's not just housing. Our next speaker, who we're going to be talking with in just a few minutes, City Council Speaker Julie Menon, and her colleagues in the City Council have done some really important things around expanding and providing Metro cards, free Metro cards or Omni cards now to some CUNY students. I'm curious, and that helps at the transit costs that CUNY students really face. But when it comes to some of these... Go ahead.
But the other thing is, I just want to say how important that is, because, again, the assumption is this is for the students to come and go to school. Really important. The other part of the transportation is if they're participating in an internship, if they're doing some of the other things that we want them to do to be ready for the economy, the Omni card becomes really, really important. Sorry for the for the interruption.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I guess I'm curious, like when it comes to the housing insecurity issues or whatever, are there ideas or recommendations you have for policymakers?
Well, I mean, every time I talk to someone, I get a different take as to how viable that is. But I do think, I mean, in providing housing assistance, I know that in different programs, different categories of individuals have been prioritized, right? I would make a case that students, college students, could easily be one. If you think about it differently too, it should be, in the best of cases, actually something that has a high payoff, right? Because you're stabilizing someone who is getting all the credentials and all the learning that he or she is going to need to be able to improve their financial situation and hopefully then not be in a situation where they are housing insecure, right? So not only are you building the social capital that we want for the city, but you're also then taking some people out of that need of assistance that then can be passed to some of the others. So I would imagine that if anybody crunched the numbers, that would be a good investment. I hear people have said that it's not easy to prioritize them, that there's some federal laws that prevent that. I'm not an expert, right? But if it is possible, I recommend that we do. And if there's some barriers, then go change the laws that make those barriers be there.
Well, obviously there's a lot of talk about how do you find new places, new lots or areas in New York City to build affordable housing. And Cuff has written about some of the surface parking lots, 80 acres or so, as Eli mentioned earlier, at CUNY, on CUNY campuses. And we've kind of said, hey, if we develop some housing on the kind of far reaches of some of these spots, maybe some of the revenues from that could go into supporting economic mobility programs at CUNY. Maybe they could also go into housing CUNY students.
So let me do the large picture answer and then respond to you as the president of a campus that dependent on parking, right? And people underestimate the importance of parking in those spaces. But let me take the large picture. Is we are exploring how we can leverage our footprint in terms of innovative ideas to be able to be part of how the city and the state responds to this crisis, right? So that's the large answer. We look at some things and we are open to exploring, and we might be doing some more intentional things in the future in that space. So it's a large yes to your overall answer. When you start dealing with individual areas, it gets more complicated, as you would expect, right? I don't own those spaces. It's Daphne, right? So people assume that, CUNY can just, so there's all this other, most of those things are bonded, and those bonds have restrictions. So in some places, you may or may not be able to enter into a partnership that would lead to using fringe parking spots for to build, right? So we are looking. So it has to be a much more nuanced analysis to do that. But we are looking at that entire inventory because we think that we owe it to our students, we owe it to the city and the state to be part of how we're able to attack this problem head on. But the and you and I joked about this when the report came out. I was the president of Queens College before, and some of our campuses that are not as well served by public transportation are the ones that end up having some of those parkings, right? And when you remove parking for any reason, right, it became one of the big, campus issues because people unfortunately need the car to get there. But we are looking at that and not just parking, other spaces, air rights, some of the other things that we could do to partner and because we think that that's part of the solution but the politics of parking is.
Yeah, well, don't we know it? Because when we put out this idea, we had the borough president of Staten Island hold a press conference to denounce us. So
I didn't want to go there, right? Yep, I think that I'm allowed.
We hear you.
I'm allowed in the island only under the pledge that I will not touch the parking spaces at CSI. But I mean, honestly, we're exploring all that, right? Because clearly, the same. I mean, there's bond issues. There's ways to sort of clean that up and do that. The other thing that's tricky, right? And I just want to put that out there is that the modeling for us to be able to get some revenue back is not as enticing, because the more that you deal with any kind of housing that is going towards affordability, the way that the mechanics of that financing works, it is not the most remunerative component. So if we were to do that, it might yield that, but I think it'd be more just doing it as part of a larger policy, being part of the solution more than a financing, just based on some of the things that we have explored.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have you back to talk about education policy, hopefully sometime soon.
I'm happy.
Thanks for entertaining us on this. And can we all kind of a big round of applause for the CUNY Chancellor?
And thank you for your great work.
Thank you. All right.